Stigmatization around mental health still exists. In the last several years, there's been an uptick in shared treatment experiences, specifically for those who were in treatment as an adolescent over the last 30 years. As a consultant working with young adults only, it's been unsettling to hear about the horrific experiences that some folks have described. As someone trained as a counselor, we were taught to do no harm. I lead with this for each client I work with. While recording this special parent series, over the last year, several parents have suggested I interview their young adults. The special parent series is noted as being just that. It's about the parent perspective only. I'm now branching out to launch the former participant series, extending the opportunity for former participants who feel comfortable talking about their journey, doing so on this podcast. No topic is off limits, and not all stories are positive. This series is meant to be honest, transparent, and real for each individual's experience through the treatment continuum. Please note that this special former participant series is the adult's perspective of their treatment experience during adolescence or as a young adult. This is merely one perspective of a single story, and it's important to know that names have been changed for the protection of the interviewee unless they have requested not to do so. These episodes may include details surrounding suicide, self-harm, substance abuse, including overdose, hospitalizations, psychotic episodes, and other traumatic experiences which include parts of the treatment journey. That includes working with consultants, being escorted by a transport company, wilderness therapy, and a residential treatment program. All that is to say, listener discretion is advised. Welcome to an episode with a former participant in treatment.
It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their non-linear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like, so I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common, and you don't have to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life at 18. If you're a parent worried about your young adult and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on a better path. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a free consultation through my website, which you can find the link for in the show notes. Today, my guest is Phil Nutt. Phil grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. He was a normal and healthy kid, other than minor anger issues and a lack of working hard academically. He identifies himself as a late bloomer to substance use relative to his peers because he started at about 15, and internally immediately became an alcoholic, while externally it took about 2 years for his parents to really begin worrying. After a failed freshman year of college, his parents gave him one option of treatment and were extremely firm with that being the only option. And in hindsight, he is very grateful for that. He began his recovery journey at 19 and had many ups and downs, but found his identity, purpose, and usefulness through that journey. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Phil. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Joanna.
I'm so glad that we're doing this. Thank you for showing up and letting me sit down and ask you some pretty personal questions.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited because you and I feel like anytime I call you, because I've got a potential referral for Choice House, I just feel like you are such an approachable and personable person. And I know a lot of like how you show up for the work that you do, which we will get to here in a little bit, is probably based on your own lived experience. But I want to dive into that. Like, how did we even get to where you are? So yeah, let's go back to the roots. I don't even know like the full story. Like, don't tell me like, where were you the day that you were born and all that kind of stuff, but really, where did you grow up? And like, at what point, because you are here as a guest, as a former program participant, like at what point did your parents feel like something was going on where we needed to intervene?
Yeah. Great question. And thank you very much for saying I'm approachable. I try to be. I'm from the Deep South. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. Grew up down there, birth to 18. Interestingly, I had all kinds of different things I needed help with, but the substances were the most apparent. And I was a little bit of a late bloomer there relative to my peers. Like Mississippi, a lot of my buddies started sneaking beers and smoking cigarettes, and then, starting to barely flirt with weed. That came a little bit later, but like around 13, 14, I was worried I was going to be an alcoholic. Runs in the family. I knew about AA. Different folks I knew had been to treatment. And so I was kind of scared of it and had this idea, I'm not going to drink because it'll probably happen to me. And then when I was 15, I guess 15 and a half, Halloween party, I was at my buddy Dylan's house and we were drinking that night. So I just took a drink. It was almost like the way the big book describes a strange mental blank spot for my first drink. I had that. And I didn't get into too much trouble until maybe, a year or so later. I started getting some consequences. But almost immediately I enjoyed drinking. I wanted to do it when it was an option. That's what I was looking forward to on the weekends. My parents, even before substances, I had divorced parents, and I had been kicked out of mom's house and dad's house before I took my first drink, mainly just from kind of behavioral stuff, this anger and frustration that I was carrying with me before I found alcohol to treat it. And maybe 6 months after my first drink, like getting to be around 16 years old, I started getting into trouble at school, getting kicked out of mom and dad's house, taking turns between the two of them. At one point, I was kicked out of both and stayed at my cousin's for a couple of days. That sucked. That feeling of like having nowhere to go, experiencing that in high school was a hell of a thing. I remember a couple of nights like that were really shitty for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So fast forward to, obviously you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when I hear about like a child of divorce, right, we kind of channel the anger, the frustration, the hurt in some of those behavioral ways and or self-medicating.
Yep.
Not always, but it oftentimes, generally speaking, can kind of go hand in hand. And when you also know that you have the predisposition because of family history and genetics, right, biology, it does exist. You are on the fast track to getting in real trouble.
Oh, yeah.
So at what point, I mean, here you are not living at your parents' house because you're kicked out of both. So you're kind of like trying to find the basic necessities. Where the heck am I even going to like lay my body tonight? But you're also still actively using. At what point did it kind of escalate where maybe there were more consequences? Or let me pause for a second and say, I'm not trying to lead this story any which way. What I'm trying to lead you to is, Phil, tell me what the heck happened. Yeah. Pick up exactly where you just left off. Like, where does this story continue to take us?
Yeah. So I've told my story a bunch at, Joyce House, at a bunch of AA meetings, that kind of thing. And I've got it somewhat detailed out, but I always forget stuff. Started getting into trouble. By the time I make it to 18, senior year, more and more things had happened that were somewhat traumatic to me. I had gotten further distance from my family, and I've got this vocabulary to describe it now. At the time, all I knew was I was frustrated and everything was everybody else's fault, and I wanted to drink. But what I was feeling at the time was alcohol was the only thing, and like unhealthy relationships were the only thing that excited me enough, made me feel loved, and in those unhealthy relationships made me feel calm and included, being a part of the party scene. So I was willing to sacrifice my academics, my relationships with my family. The biggest one for me was my relationship with my little sister that started to have a lot of consequences. My mom wouldn't let me be around Lilley, my little sister. And that was the one thing that cut through before I went to treatment, of like a message of, I've got some bad stuff going on right now and I need some help if that's the case. But my school drug tested us, and we would not use drugs around that, or try and plot around them. By the time I got to senior year, I didn't care anymore. I was smoking pot all the way through. Never got drug tested once until I got hair tested. Towards the end of that, this is when I still had hair. I'm a bald guy now. But they
could you tell my face was like, I'm picturing you with hair.
Yeah. They hair tested us at the end of senior year, and the weekend before that, I had gone up to Oxford, Mississippi, where Ole Miss is, and gotten into cocaine and gotten into apparently PCP. I felt for PCP. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it was in the cocaine. But stuff like that was starting to happen. That was kind of one that woke me up. Like these incidents were getting more severe, you know? And by the end of senior year, maybe 2 weeks before school's getting out, I get pulled over. I get a DUI, a reckless endangerment, a minor in possession. Been drinking at a party and was driving home with my girlfriend at the time. And the family starts looking at sending me to treatment. My stepdad had been in the field for a good while. He got sober in '01. So at this point, he had been sober 10 years, worked in the field. My mom, of course, loved him and trusted him. My dad and my stepdad had a good relationship too. He actually helped my dad with some of his friends and colleagues with treatment help. So Scott just said, you know, Phil needs to go off to treatment. And I was going to do like some sort of wilderness experience. I didn't get many of the details at the time. There's some times that I have subconsciously manipulated my parents. This is a time where I fully consciously knew exactly how to call my dad, tell him that mom and her husband were crazy. This place I was going to was unsafe, get him fired up and want to defend me from it. And it worked. And so dad put me in his pool house over the summer between high school and college. I had to work at his golf course, which I got fired from in 2 months. And I drank and used drugs all summer. And I just had a curfew, and that was my dad's punishment. I lived at the pool house and got to drink and do as much drugs as I wanted to. So yeah, that was a flubbed attempt. There was infighting in the family. I ended up going to a freshman year of college. My drinking, there was a tremendous amount of really bad experiences over that year. In terms of safety, I should have gone, in between high school and college. In terms of me developing some internal motivation for sobriety and getting scared enough to actually start doing some work, it might have been important. It's hard to say, because some horrible things could have happened. I was very lucky they didn't. I drove drunk so many times in Nashville at the music school I went to, but it was a train wreck. I joined a fraternity. I was drinking all the time, completely separated from the family, and failed out by the end of my second semester there. And then my dad committed a fairly cardinal rule against kind of the intervention process. The family gets to talking. I call my stepmom in a blackout one night and just say, I'm not doing well. I need help. Family gets to talking, my step-parents, my parents, and come up with a plan to send me to treatment. And they're going to let me know after I take my last exam, and then I'm going. My dad calls me a week before that date. And I think maybe his idea was to kind of hook me up a little bit. I'm not sure what was going through his head, but he said, Phil, the family's been talking. You're going to go to treatment, finish your exams up strong, and then you'll head out to Utah, which is a terrible idea because that was the most dangerous period of my entire life, almost to date. I picked up a handle of Evan Williams Green Label whiskey. I picked up some marijuana and some cocaine. I drove down to Oxford, where Ole Miss campus was from Nashville, which is about a 3.5-hour drive. I blacked out on the drive down there. And I came to back in my bed, my dorm at Belmont, and I figured I must have just gotten drunk and turned around. And I look at my phone, and I've got 10, not more than that, 100 missed calls. So many texts, pictures, and it's 5 days later. And memories from that 5 days have come back, and they started coming back pretty quick. But I had just kind of blurry / blackout, grayed out, whatever, through 5 days. Skipped all my exams. My car I lost the keys to it. It's still in Oxford. I'm driving my sister's car. I borrowed it to get back to Nashville because I told her I had to finish this exam, which of course I skipped. And then I drove down to Oxford, gave Callie her car back, my older sister, got to Jackson, and the next morning, that night I got home, and then my stepdad, Scott, was there. I said, when am I going to treatment? He said, in the morning. I said, cool, I'm going to bed. And I just walked upstairs and went to sleep. And the next morning we got on a flight to to Salt Lake, I think, and then drove down to Loa for Legacy, where I went for 90 days.
Okay. Holy cow. I think the one thing I will say in doing this that I try not to be reactive to people's stories and just listen to them, but I am shook by that part of the story where I wasn't expecting the lead up where you're like, I woke up in my room, and then it was wait, 5 days later, 5 days. Holy cow, Phil. I had a very strong reaction to that part of your story. So I'm glad that I think you said there's a lot of gratitude for how things could have been very different all of those times that you were driving drunk or just, under the influence and doing things that could have impacted you differently. But getting to Legacy probably saved your life. at that point.
100%.
So, and I've had guests on the show before, some folks that have worked at Legacy, some that were participants at Legacy, not a ton, but some.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we'll put a link for, if anybody's interested, you can just Google Legacy Treatment Center. That's a part of your story. That's not where you work now, right? So you're leading up. Legacy helped you start your recovery journey. Where did you go after Legacy?
So I was there for about 70 days altogether. And then from Legacy, I transferred straight to Jaywalker Lodge in Carbondale. And this is in 2012. May of 2012, I started Legacy. Mid-July of 2012, I get over to Jaywalker and do 90 full days there. So back to back, they double booked me, which I didn't know was somewhat unique. I was just like, I guess that's what you do. So I got the double dose.
Yeah, you got the longest residential runway that you possibly could.
I did, yeah. Yeah, like 5.5 months altogether.
Yeah, that's a long time in residential, but in both very beautiful places, programs that are notorious for doing great work for men in need of kind of like structured quality, but also like experiential programming, again, with the focus being recovery oriented. After Jaywalker, where did your path take you? And I asked this question, let me pause before you answer, because you're saying this was what, 13 years ago? Something like that, 12 years ago? Can I do math?
I was 19, yeah.
Okay. So it was long enough ago where obviously things have happened between now and then, right? Whether or not that the experience at Legacy stuck or the experience from Jaywalker stuck or where you are in your recovery. What I'm interested in is eventually getting to kind of where it is that you are now, right? Because oftentimes too, I get parents that listen to this podcast and sometimes their fears, which is very normal, is my child going to be okay? Or the young adult is, if I go to treatment, or, am I actually going to enjoy life if I'm sober, right? Like these are some very real questions that are asked on both sides of the table. But I also want to make sure that we get to that, to just like talk a little bit from your perspective. And so give us kind of the high notes of, from Jaywalker, how did we get to where you are now? Obviously Carbondale, Boulder, like we can look at a map, but that's not your story. So where did you go in between?
Yeah. So, on the map, I just drove southwest 2.5 hours, or southeast 2.5 hours. In terms of the story, I left Jaywalker into a sober living, St. Paul Sober Living, which is based in St. Paul in the Twin Cities, has 2 houses in Carbondale. I went there. That was pretty much the only option at the time after Jaywalker. So I went there for 2 months and ended up relapsing. My mother came out to visit with my 2 sisters, and there was a bunch of vodka in the pantry. Drank it the first night, mental blank spot thing. I kind of sat there with the bottle thinking like, this is dumb. I'm going to get kicked out of sober living. But I hadn't had a first step experience. I didn't understand that like my ability to not pick up a drink was not my own. I didn't have that ability. I would argue that I still don't. And I rely on like my 12-step experience relationship with a higher power to help me with that. So I drank. After about 2 days, mom and the sisters left town. Went to it was opening day of ski season. I fell off the ski lift, or the chair lift, 3 times into the snow. I was okay, but I was drunk. And by the time I got home back to the sober living that night, our house manager smelled it on me, said, "Phil, can you come take a breathalyzer for me?" Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't been drinking, no problem. Let's go. And he gets it out, and I'm like, I've been drinking for 3 days. So he kicked me out, dropped me off at a hotel in Carbondale. I'm 19. I don't have a credit card. I don't even know how to get a hotel room. Or could I? I was chairing a meeting across the street. I went and stayed there for 2 nights. And then I went to a place called The Retreat in Wayzata, Minnesota for 30 days. And there is where I had my white light experience, if you want to call it that. It wasn't like a bright light and hearing the voice of God, but it was just the idea of maybe I'll try working the 12 steps. Maybe I'll try saying a prayer, even if I don't think this is going to work. Maybe I'll start listening to the therapists and professionals around me, because this is just not going well. And I think a big part of that openness, which this is about 2 weeks in after being kind of a hard-headed client there, even after a relapse, my dad said, Phil, we're not doing this 10, 11, 12 treatment thing. I love you to death. I hope you get it. But I think this is going to be the last one we're going to do here. I'm never going to cut you off emotionally, but I can't keep going through the thing if you feel like you got this backup plan all the time. Mm-hmm. And I believed him, and it kind of clicked for me that nobody was coming to Al-Anon me. Nobody was coming to save me and rescue me from all this chaos that I was creating over and over again. And it was just time to grow up and, just start listening and trying. And as soon as that shift happened, then I could hear what my therapist was saying. Then I could hear what my sponsor was saying. Then I was like, this really isn't that bad. If I wasn't trying to drink, all this stuff is pretty awesome. As long as I'm trying to manipulate and run the show and get back to a drink someday or just get back home or be in charge, then I got a big problem with everybody around me. And once I had a little bit of that surrender, things started to go awesome. So I had a great experience there. I went back to Carbondale. I lived there for 3 years. I'm sober all of it. I moved down to Boulder after 3 years, because it's time to get a degree and get a career started and get to life and everything. And I come to the Front Range. I do great for a year and in school. And then the following year, things start to get a little bit worse. And after about a year of slowly not going to meetings, I don't have a community built up down there. I didn't work hard on it. I didn't pick up a new sponsor. I saw the differences in the, AA meetings I was going to and all the people I was friends with. I was back in a college town and I was feeling insecure about they're having a bunch of fun. I'm kind of the old guy, even though I was still just 22. And I relapsed. I smoked pot for like 45 days, maybe, max. And then one day I just threw it away. I had 5 years of sobriety. Every single one of my friends was sober and cared about me and didn't care about me being uncomfortable. I mean, they were coming just through my door, checking on me and just kind of trying to arrest this relapse that I'd had. I don't think they knew necessarily, but they knew I wasn't doing well. And the Jaywalker story ties in here because Jordan Hamilton, who's the CEO at Choice House, was a tech at Jaywalker. He and I got to be friends while I was up there. When I moved to Boulder in 2015, he immediately just got me around Choice House. I was sponsoring guys. He was taking me to meetings. We were at CU together, finishing school, and we were buddies. And so finally, after this relapse, I let 3 or 4 months go by without telling anybody. I had dinner with him. And he just said, "How you doing, man?" And I said, "I'm okay. I'm kind of struggling a little bit." He's like, "You're not okay at all, dude. You're struggling bad." And he said, "I know your story, and I know you had a pretty horrifically traumatic childhood, and you hadn't really gotten help with that yet." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, you're right." I gave him my mom's cell phone number, which he already had. And he called her and just said, "This is what Phil's doing. This is where I think he needs to go." And I went to a place called the Bridge to Recovery in Kentucky for 30 days. And for the first time, learned what trauma was, started to do experiential work and psychodrama work. Honestly, I left there angrier than when I got there. It kicked up a lot of stuff for me that I had somewhat buried a little bit. I didn't know how to address that. And luckily, I got back to Boulder and I got a sponsor. And then I started just diving into the 4-step on it. Okay, I need clinical work to dig all this up. How do I actually feel about it? Because I got no idea. I dug it all up, and then I continued working with a therapist weekly for 3 years after that, weekly therapy sessions. And I had a hard-ass sponsor, a guy from New Orleans who just took me through the book and helped me find forgiveness from my mom and dad, but mom was the big one. And that was a miracle in my life, was finding that forgiveness. I didn't think that was going to be possible. Got totally freed from it. We have an unbelievable relationship today. Got back into school, so I'm doing well. I'm back into school. I work as a tech at Choice House in 2019, just kind of as a job in between classes. Love it. I get to hang out with the boys, do all the fun stuff we do at Choice House. I got to do a bunch of activities, going to the Y, going skiing, going fishing and golfing. I was just like, this is electric. This is the best job ever right now. And I finally graduated CU in 2020, right as the pandemic started, which kind of sucked. I didn't get to walk after 8 years of working on it. Oh. My mom was so bummed about that. But I did finance for 2 years, odd jobs here and there, doing some financial forecasting, basic stuff. Didn't love it. Started to get back a little isolated. And then Jordan starts pinging me again and saying, "Phil, I think you might be good at admissions here at Choice. Do you want to give it a shot?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm doing this, finance thing. It's fine, blah, blah, blah. I can't sponsor guys if I start working with you, et cetera." And then finally, I was actually on a phone call with a guy named Adam, who's one of my dearest and closest friends. He lives in Texas now. He is a buddy for a long time. He's an alumni of Jaywalker and Choice. And I was talking to him, and he said, "Text Hamilton back right now and tell him you'll work for him. I'm not getting off the phone." And so I texted Jordan. I said, "I'm in. When can I start?" And I started like the next Monday. That was on a Thursday or Friday. And so I've been at Choice House for 3 years on the admissions team. Started working under a guy named Kyle. Kyle left about a year and a half ago, just went a different direction with his career. And so I've been the admissions director since July of 23, I think. So coming up on 2 years as admissions director, and have, I mean, just seen this program since 2015, sponsoring guys for 3 years, to 2019 as a tech, to 22 when I started in admissions, to 25 now. Not expand, not get huge, not open programs everywhere, get better and better and better systematically with a better team of staff. And I'm just fired up on this spot. I am extremely passionate about this place. I love it. I work like I own the place, is how I look at it. I fall in love with every guy who comes through here. I try to have healthy boundaries, but I do. I fall in love with every guy. And I just, it's a great job. It's cool to have my story and this identity piece around my relationship with my mom and cleaning that up and getting to be, a loving and kind of stable rock of the family now.
Yeah.
And get to help other mothers dealing with their 19-year-old kids who are in the same amount of pain with me, and they're probably angry, somewhat justified, mostly unjustified, walk through this experience. And I just got a whole bunch of experience professionally now too, not just anecdotally of how to be helpful there.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it totally ties back to how I perceive you in relationship. Like, anytime I pick up the phone with you, it's like your care for that person, right? Whether or not they come to Choice is evident through the phone call, because a lot of these iterations of your own story, right? It wasn't just like at 19, all of a sudden, like we're on this straight and narrow path. You've had so many twists and turns, and some of it isn't just tied to even being sober. It is like a part of that recovery process where we need to forgive, right? We need to like surrender. There are parts to that can be where like we hold on to rage. But again, all of this is to say, like, you've done your work. You're pouring all that into this interview where you're just like a completely open book, which again, I really appreciate the vulnerability. And it speaks to kind of the marrying of your personal experience and professionally how you're showing up, because there's no different Phil, right? Like where you're at now is like fully informed based on your experience, and it puts you in the perfect position to be at the helm of admissions, answering those calls for moms that are contacting Choice, but also to be working for an organization that is privately owned and continues to focus on doing good work. So I'm going to make sure that we have the links to all things Choice House, contacting Phil, right? Email, phone number, all the things. So anybody that's interested in learning more about Choice House and or just wanting to connect with Phil, do that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, here's the call to action. If you aren't sure, like, still just pick up the phone and call him. Or I'll do this thing where I'll just text Phil and say, like, Phil, you got to answer every call for every person that is reaching out to you because of this silly podcast that I host.
Some of my favorite calls are calls that come to me directly or come to Choice House or come to our admissions line, whatever, that just are immediately not a fit here for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then I just get to be helpful, then it's like, doesn't feel like work at all, of like landing a case and walking a family through that. Cause it's a process to get a guy into Choice House. I mean, we screen pretty heavily. We ask a lot. We want to make sure families are ready to do something like this. Then when it's just like, hey, I'm not a fit, but I need some help. Here's 15 different numbers. Here's kind of rankings of those. Have you tried even just going to AA, like all that kind of stuff, and getting to kind of cut past everything and be helpful is, that fills me up quite a bit.
Yeah, I can tell. Okay, so asking this question, because it is loaded, now that we've heard your full story, this podcast is titled Success is Subjective for a reason. So do you see yourself as successful?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so follow-up question immediately, because I'm going to do this rapid fire, is if your younger self could see you right now, right? Whether it's literally like 17, 18-year-old Phil or even 25-year-old Phil, like what would he say about you right now?
Before sobriety, Phil?
Open to whatever iteration of Phil you want to kind of project on.
Okay. Boy, I tell you, angry 18, 19-year-old Phil, his immediate reaction would be, this is, first of all, you're bald. And then he would say, you have this, boring life. You're not doing anything wild. You're not in and out of relationships all the time. You're like this kind of stable square. But Phil, before sobriety, also was a soft kid too. And that would be the immediate reaction. He would soften into, this could make me emotional thinking about a big brother, about how I show up for Lilley now. She's getting ready. I'm leaving this weekend. I'm leaving Thursday to go to her graduation at Alabama. And I have not just talked to her all the time, helped her on papers, helped her on application summaries. I mean, she's a vice president of every club at Alabama. She's the opposite of how I showed up in school. And not just in care and emotionally regulated, loving ear to talk to as her older brother, but just a lot of help too on a bunch of different stuff. And I think that is what I would look at, how I've turned that completely around from not being able to show up for Lilley because getting alcohol and staying drunk was, for me at the time, more important. I had to do it to stay okay and safe and well and feel like I could deal with life. Into I'm no longer actively drinking. The obsession with alcohol has been removed. I've done an unbelievable amount of therapy, and I get to just be a good brother to her. I think he would also be impressed with me sitting at the Thanksgiving table with all of our insane family dynamics, just kind of relaxed, sitting there watching the show of everything and internally being okay and emotionally regulated. That is a superpower and a miracle that I have that now. I think 19-year-old Phil say, how are you doing that, dude? Don't you need to tell Dad to change this and tell Callie to change that and, fix this about Mom? And no, dude, I'm just going to kind of let it ride and do my thing,
Yep. Talk about control.
Oh, God. It's what's the thing in the middle of a lever? The pendulum?
Sure.
I guess it's the pendulum of recovery, depending on if I'm trying to move away from control and trust the process, trust my family, the professionals around me, my higher power, versus I'm not taken care of and these people don't have my best interests in heart. I have to stay drinking. I have to stay control of my finances and get every dollar I can into my account. Is the perspective on treatment as a guy is getting sober. And again, in my story with going to that spot, the retreat, like, finally there, I was ready to hear it and just give up a little bit. The paradoxical nature of surrender is how you beat addiction. It's everything.
It is. Well, Phil, I really appreciate you taking the time to share even like a glimpse into your story. I know you said like, I share my story all the time and like what detail am I going to actually kind of divulge this time? So I feel like you were very forthcoming and detailed, and I just appreciate you on being who you are now, right? In the role that you're in, but also just as the human that you are showing up on the other end of the screen as we're doing this interview. I know that there are parents listening to this, and I also know that there are young adults listening to this who are probably connecting on some level or in some part of your story, and just appreciate the openness in which you shared it, and hope, again, this is my call to action for them. If they need to reach out to you because for whatever reason they are connecting to you and your voice through this interview, I hope that they do that. Yeah,
I hope so too. In that vein, I want to share one last thing of, I think, kind of why I was able to get sober at 19, which is tough, very tough to do. And mothers and fathers, this is maybe would sound scary for a client listening to this. A potential young guy who maybe needs treatment is going to hate me for saying this. The reason I was able to get sober is because my mom trusted my stepdad, my dad trusted my stepdad, and he came with the experience of, hey, Phil probably needs to go to Colorado for like at minimum a year. And when he really is wanting to come home, we probably need to tell him he needs to stick it out for a little bit, which they had that confidence because they knew Scott knew good programs that I was going to be safe at, which is terrifying of a mother. What if this is true? What if he's at a bad program and I'm just abandoning my child right now? Getting to a good program so you can catch your breath and just be like, no, you got to stay. This is part of it. It's so nonlinear and ups and downs and the emotional swings. I mean, almost everybody going through treatment wants to get out early, at 100%.
I appreciate you sharing that. And that's tremendously helpful because way to end on this like piece of advice that just feels like a mic drop. Hey, as you're looking, right, like in this process, you do have to, what I'm hearing you say actually is that your story worked because your parents had an adult that they could trust, that understood the path that they were on. And I do think that that is in vein with the work that you do at Choice House. Again, speaking to like programs with integrity, right? Doing good work. There are a lot of bad apples that exist out there. And if you are questioning, well, is the place that we're looking at, is that one, does it fall, which category does it fall in? How can we trust this program? Please don't trust anything that you read on Google, especially if you're Googling to find a treatment, and whatever initially pops up, please don't do like, I'm just going to click on the first link because that's what showed up. Like, do your due diligence, connect with people, do research, and figure out, making sure that if you are having to find this program or experience for not just your loved one, but for the entire family, because let's get real, it is about the whole family. Make sure that you are connecting with good people. So I'm going to end with, and Phil is one of those good people. So give him a call. If Choice House is it, great. If it's not, Phil's going to probably direct you towards something else, just because that's the kind of good human that he is.
I try.
And you have a great sense of humor. So another reason to just reach out to him, because he's like, if you can get him to laugh, or he's got some jokes, like it's a good lighthearted time.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. It's when I'm talking to a young guy who's scared to come in here, if I can get him laughing, we can immediately start building some rapport and feeling some safer and more comfortable. It's important.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Phil. I will hopefully see you soon.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much again, Joanna, for having me on. This is fun.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.